Seeds of Wealth. Why Some Plant and Others Consume. Full audiobook. Chapter 1. The Hidden Power of a Seed. You hold something in your hands that looks so small it could almost be ignored. It slips through your fingers easily, lighter than dust, quieter than a whisper. Yet inside that tiny forms a power so immense it can change entire landscapes. A single seed can grow into a towering tree, and that tree can give birth to countless others. If you look closer, you will realize a seed is never just a seed. It is possibility waiting for someone bold enough to believe in what it can become. Most people pass through life blind to this hidden power. They treat money, time, or opportunity the way they treat seeds scattered on a sidewalk. They trample over them, thinking these small units hold no real weight. But the truth is, every dollar that touches your hand, every moment of energy you choose to spend, and every skill you decide to sharpen carries the same nature as a seed. What you do with it determines whether your future will be barren ground or a flourishing field. Think of this. If you were given 100 seeds, you could roast them, eat them, and satisfy your hunger for a single afternoon. Or you could place them into fertile soil, water them, and guard them with patience. Those same 100 seeds could, in time, turn into a harvest of 10,000. This is not just a lesson in agriculture. It is the very principle that governs financial destiny. The wealthy are not necessarily those who start with more seeds. They are those who recognize the hidden power within each seed and refuse to consume them all at once. You may wonder how such a principle plays out in ordinary life. Consider a young man named Daniel, who once earned $50 for a weekend of part-time work. His friends urged him to spend it immediately on fast food, movie tickets, and small pleasures. Daniel wanted to join them, but he chose differently. He went to a local library, borrowed books on investing, and placed that $50 into a small savings account. Over the years, every small deposit multiplied. That simple decision at 16 years old eventually became a foundation for him to purchase a car in cash at 20, and later, his first home before his 30th birthday. His friends, who laughed at his choice, had little to show for all the weekends they consumed their seeds. This is the mystery that most people never uncover. The seed is always more valuable in the future than in the present. What you consume disappears in moments, but what you plant grows beyond your control. You may not see the sprout tomorrow, and that is why so many give up. But those who persist, who trust the process, discover that time is the most faithful partner of the planter. Take another example, this time with numbers more concrete. Imagine a woman who saves $200 every month beginning at the age of 21. She places it in an investment that grows steadily at an average of 7% a year. By the time she reaches 61, she will have planted nearly $100,000. But the growth of those seeds, multiplied over 4 decades, will make her harvest surpass $500,000. Compare her to someone who begins at 31 and saves the same amount with the same return. That person will plant $80,000, but their harvest will be just above $250,000. The 10-year delay cut the forest in half. The seed is powerful, but only for the one who recognizes its urgency. It is tempting to think that power lies in windfalls or extraordinary luck, like winning a lottery ticket or inheriting an estate. But history shows that most fortunes do not come from sudden events. They come from ordinary seeds planted consistently. The baker who reinvests part of his earnings into better ovens. The teacher who sets aside a portion of her income for her retirement account every month. The immigrant who works long hours, lives modestly, and saves enough to open a small shop. These are planters. Their lives may look simple, but their future speaks loudly. There is also a darker truth. Many people never plant. They consume every seed they get. They complain about never getting ahead, yet each paycheck vanishes on unnecessary purchases. Their closet fills with clothes worn once or twice. Their driveway holds a car that loses value the moment it leaves the lot. Their weekends are full of restaurants and parties, but their accounts are empty. These people live with the illusion of abundance while destroying the possibility of real abundance. They're like someone who eats the seeds meant for tomorrow's forest and then wonders why their land remains empty year after year. The hidden power of a seed is not only about multiplication, but also about vision. To see a seed as more than itself requires imagination. It requires faith to believe that what is invisible today will be visible tomorrow. This is why so few harness the true potential of what they hold. Planting requires patience, and patience feels painful in a world addicted to instant pleasure. You are constantly bombarded with messages urging you to consume now, enjoy now, live only for the moment. Yet behind those voices lies an economy built on your lack of foresight. The system thrives when you eat your seeds. You must choose to silence the noise and hold your ground as a planter. Consider a woman named Elena who lived in a crowded city. She worked long shifts at a factory and earned barely enough to cover her rent and food. But Elena decided that no matter how little she earned, she would treat each paycheck as a handful of seeds. She placed $10 aside every week. It was small, almost laughable, but she refused to consume it. Over years, that habit grew into thousands. Eventually, she used it to enroll in night school, which led her to a better job and later, a small business of her own. Elena never began with abundance, yet she built abundance because she understood the hidden power in what others dismissed as too small to matter. When you begin to look at your life this way, you realize every choice is either planting or consuming. You do not need a fortune to start. You only need to respect the seed you already have. The danger is not in having little, but in believing that little is worthless. Even one seed has the potential to grow into something far beyond its current size. The hidden power of a seed lies not in what you see, but in what you believe enough to protect. And the question you must ask yourself is simple. Will you treat the seeds in your hands as temporary satisfaction or as the foundation of your forest? The answer to that question will decide whether you walk through life with empty soil or with shade, fruit, and abundance. You may not realize it, but every great fortune began as something that looked small, almost invisible. Seeds do not announce themselves with fireworks. They arrive quietly in ordinary envelopes called paychecks, chances, or choices. What you do with them separates those who build lasting wealth from those who forever chase it. A seed is not impressive by itself. It only becomes extraordinary when joined with time, care, and vision. The tragedy is that most people underestimate the effect of small beginnings. They believe that unless they can invest thousands at once, it is not worth planning at all. This belief blinds them to the reality that greatness almost always grows out of what is humble. Think of an orchard. Every tree that now towers high once began as something no bigger than the nail on your finger. The power was always there, hidden, waiting for the planter to believe. Your financial life works the same way. You may think your savings or investments are too small to matter, but when they are consistently planted, watered, and guarded, they can transform your landscape. There's a story of a man named Victor who lived in a small town and worked as a janitor at a local school. He earned modest wages, never more than $30,000 a year, and most people assumed he would remain poor his entire life. Yet, Victor made a decision early on. He would never spend every seed. Even if it was just $50 a month, he would plant something. He bought bonds, later some stocks, and held them faithfully. When Victor died in his 80s, the community was shocked to discover that he had left behind an estate worth over $8 million. The janitor had more wealth than many doctors and lawyers, not because he had more seeds, but because he respected the power within them. This example is not a fairy tale. It is a reminder that ordinary people can unlock extraordinary results when they refuse to despise small beginnings. Imagine this principle in your own life. Let us say you save $100 each month starting at 25 years old, placing it into an account that grows at 6% annually. By the time you turn 65, those modest monthly seeds will become nearly $200,000. But if you double the seed to $200 each month, the forest grows into nearly $400,000. The only difference was a choice to plant more consistently. Yet, planting is not only about money. Seeds take many forms. The hours you dedicate to learning, the discipline you apply to your habits, the relationships you nurture instead of neglect. Each of these grows into outcomes that compound. If you spend an hour each day learning a new skill, you may not notice much after a week. But give it 5 years, and that daily seed has the power to open doors you never thought possible. Time is ruthless with consumers, but generous with planners. It punishes waste and multiplies investment. Still, every seed demands trust. You bury it underground where you cannot see it, and for weeks nothing seems to happen. Doubt whispers that you wasted your effort. In finances, this doubt appears when your savings look small or your investments do not show immediate growth. That is when most people abandon the field, digging up what they planted and running back to consumption. But those who endure discover the magic that occurs in silence. The roots strengthen before the sprout ever breaks the surface. Your patience is never wasted. It is a soil in which multiplication takes place. Think of Sarah, a nurse who once faced overwhelming debt. She owed nearly $20,000 from credit cards and student loans. Every month, most of her paycheck vanished into interest payments. It seemed impossible to escape, but she chose to treat her repayment as planting. She set aside $500 a month, attacking her debt consistently. It took her 5 years of discipline. But when she was finally free, she redirected that same $500 into investments. Over the next 2 decades, that single habit turned into more than $300,000. What began as an act of survival became a harvest of freedom. Her story proves that even negative ground can become fertile again when you begin to plant. You may look at your situation and see only scarcity, but the truth is you are already holding seeds. The question is not whether you have them, but what you will do with them. Will you consume them the moment they reach your hand? Or will you bury them in faith? Know they carry more power than you can currently imagine? Every wealthy person you admire once stood where you stand. They held something small and chose to plant. The difference between the barren and the fruitful is never luck. It is a decision to act on the hidden power of a seed. As you move forward, remember that the greatness of a forest is not visible in the day it is planted, but in the years that follow. Your harvest will not shout in the beginning, but one day it will be impossible to ignore, and all of it will trace back to the quiet decision you made when the seed was still in your hand. Chapter 2: The Consumers and Planners. From the beginning of time, humanity has been divided into 2 groups, those who consume and those who plant. This division is not marked by education, background, or even the size of one's paycheck. It is determined by mindset. You can give 2 people the same opportunity, the same income, even the same advice, and watch one turn it into abundance while the other remains trapped in scarcity. The difference lies in how they treat the seeds in their hands. The consumers are easy to recognize. They live with an urgency that whispers, use it now or lose it. The moment their paycheck arrives, it begins to evaporate. Rent, food, and transportation are necessary expenses. But after those, the rest dissolves into entertainment, gadgets, clothing, or outings that bring temporary satisfaction but leave nothing lasting behind. These individuals rarely think beyond the present week. Their horizon ends at the next desire, and they convince themselves that more income will solve the problem. Yet, even when their earnings increase, their habits consume the rays just as quickly. They are like people who receive a basket of seeds and cook them into bread, never realizing they could have grown fields. Planners, on the other hand, live with a different lens. They see every seed as a decision with consequences. Their paycheck is not just income, it is potential. They cover their necessary expenses, but they also make a deliberate choice to set aside part of what they earn for the future. This decision is often ridiculed. Friends may tease them for living modestly, for not upgrading to the newest car, for declining expensive nights out. But the planner is not motivated by appearances. They are motivated by vision. They understand that wealth is not built in sudden leaps, but in consistent, deliberate planting. Let's take a practical illustration. Imagine 2 neighbors, both 30 years old, both earning the same salary of $40,000 a year. The first, whom we will call Thomas, spends nearly everything he earns. He drives a car purchase with a long-term loan, eats out regularly, and buys new clothes whenever he feels the urge. At the end of each month, Thomas has a little more than $200 left in his account. The second neighbor, Anna, makes the same income but has trained herself to plant. Every month, she sets aside $500 into an investment account. After 1 year, the difference is not dramatic. Thomas has lived comfortably, Anna has been a little more restrained, and their lives appear similar. But fast forward 20 years. Thomas has accumulated nothing of value beyond depreciated possessions. Anna, on the other hand, has planted $120,000, and with growth, her harvest is closer to $250,000. The difference is not luck, intelligence, or opportunity. It is the simple difference between consuming and planting. What makes consumption so dangerous is that it feels satisfying in the moment. When you buy something, you feel rewarded. Your brain releases chemicals of pleasure, convincing you that you made the right choice. Planting, however, often feels empty at first. You put your seed away, and there is no immediate reward. You may even feel poorer in the short term. This is why so many avoid planting. They are addicted to the immediate satisfaction that consumption delivers. But like any addiction, the satisfaction fades quickly, leaving behind only the hunger for more. Consider a short story of Javier, a young professional in Madrid. He graduated with honors, landed a job paying $60,000 a year, and quickly adopted the lifestyle of his peers. He moved into a stylish apartment, purchased luxury furniture, and celebrated success by traveling often. For years, he consumed without thinking. Then at 35, he faced an unexpected layoff. With no savings, no investments, and growing debt, his life unraveled almost overnight. Contrast him with his friend Clara, who earned the same salary but planted faithfully. She lived in a modest apartment, resisted unnecessary luxuries, and built her investments step by step. When the layoff came, Clara had enough to survive for years, and even started her own business with the seeds she had planted. The same city, the same income, the same age, but two very different destinies. You might wonder why, if the evidence is so clear, so many remain consumers. The answer lies in perspective. Consumers believe life is about enjoying now and hoping that tomorrow somehow works itself out. They assume wealth belongs to the lucky, the talented, or those born with advantages. They do not see their own power to plant. Planters, in contrast, believe that tomorrow can be shaped by today's discipline. They know that while they cannot control every circumstance, they can control the choice to plant or consume. That single choice, repeated over years, creates a gap between struggle and abundance. Numbers once again reveal this truth with piercing clarity. If two friends both earn $50,000 annually and one spends it all while the other invests just 10%, the planner will be setting aside $5,000 each year. Over 30 years, with a moderate return, those seeds can grow into more than $500,000. Meanwhile, the consumer remains with nothing but memories of meals eaten, clothes worn, and entertainment long forgotten. The math is merciless, but it is also hopeful. It proves that anyone, regardless of starting point, can move from consumer to planner with consistent action. The division between consumers and planners is not abstract. It shows up in every decision you make. Do you buy the latest phone when your current one still works? Do you eat out 5 times a week? Or do you cook at home and save the difference? Do you spend every bonus at once? Or do you plan a portion for your future? Each of these decisions may feel small, but they accumulate. Over time, they draw a line that separates two kinds of lives, one of constant anxiety and one of growing freedom. If you want to step into abundance, the first step is simple but profound. Stop consuming every seed. The temptation will always be there, but so will the choice. Your future forest depends not on the seeds you wish you had, but on what you decide to plant with what is already in your hand. The truth is harsh but liberating. Your financial story is not written by the size of your paycheck, but by your relationship with the seeds in your possession. Consumers and planters live side by side in every city, yet their lives drift further apart with each passing year. They shop at the same grocery stores, sit in the same traffic, and watch the same television shows, but their futures are separated by a chasm created entirely by choice. A consumer always finds a reason to explain their emptiness. They will tell you that they would save if only they earned a little more, if only the cost of living were not so high, if only they did not have so many obligations. But when more income does come, the pattern repeats. Their expenses expand to fill the new space. A planter, by contrast, decides that planting is non-negotiable. It does not matter if their income is small or large. They carve out a portion to sow. To them, planting is not optional. It is a discipline, almost a sacred duty, because they know that seeds left unplanted are opportunities forever lost. Let us picture two coworkers. both receiving the same annual bonus of $5,000. James, the consumer, treats the money as a reward for his hard work. He books a vacation, buys a new laptop, and treats himself to fancy dinners. Within weeks, the money has vanished, leaving only fading memories. Maria, the planter, makes a different choice. She uses part of her bonus to pay off debt and invest the rest. 10 years later, Maria's small bonuses, consistently planted, have grown into more than $80,000, while James has nothing beyond souvenirs in a drawer. What looked like a tiny difference at the beginning became a canyon, separating security from struggle. This division can be seen even in entire cultures. Visit a neighborhood where consumption reigns, and you'll find flashy cars parked in front of houses with little equity. Restaurants and bars thrive, but savings accounts remain empty. Credit card balances grow faster than incomes, and the cycle of debt becomes generational. On the other hand, walk through communities where planting is the norm and you notice quieter wealth. Families live below their means, invest in education, and own businesses that endure for decades. The cars may not be the newest, but the children inherit opportunities instead of bills. Seeds, when planted across generations, create forests of prosperity that stand tall while others face famine. There is also an emotional difference between consumers and planters. Consumers live with the constant weight of anxiety. Because they consume everything, they are always one emergency away from collapse. A car breakdown, a medical bill, or a job loss becomes a crisis that shakes their entire world. Planters experience challenges too, but they face them with resilience. Their seeds, multiplied over time, form a cushion. They do not live free of storms, but they are rooted enough to withstand them. This peace of mind is priceless. It allows them to make better decisions, to take calculated risks, and to face the future with confidence instead of fear. The psychology of consumption is seductive because it promises immediate comfort. Yet comfort in the moment often translates into captivity tomorrow. Buying the newest phone feels good today, but it locks you into payments that limit tomorrow's choices. Eating at expensive restaurants may create joy for a night, but it robs you the chance to invest in a future of freedom. Every time you consume, you trade long-term abundance for short-term pleasure. Planners reverse this. They endure the smaller discomfort of waiting today, so they can enjoy the greater reward later. They delay gratification not out of misery, but out of vision. They can already see the forest where others see only the seed. Take a man named Elias. At 24, he earned just $35,000 a year. He could have justified living paycheck to paycheck like his friends. But Elias chose to live in a modest apartment and drive an old car. He planted $200 every month, no matter what. Decades passed, and his seeds grew steadily. By the time he was 64, those seeds had become more than $600,000. Meanwhile, his closest friend Noah, who had earned the same income, spent freely and reached retirement with nothing but Social Security checks. One lived with freedom, the other with fear. The choice between consuming and planting is made in small, invisible moments, not grand decisions. It happens at the checkout line, when you decide whether to buy what you do not need. It happens on payday when you decide whether to save before spending or spend before saving. It happens every time you choose between satisfaction now or multiplication later. And though these choices seem small, they build momentum. One direction leads to freedom, the other leads to chains. It is not enough to admire the wisdom of planting. You must live it. Every seed in your possession asks you the same question. Will you consume me for a fleeting moment, or will you trust me to grow into something greater? Consumers keep answer with appetite, and their lives reflect it. Planters answer with patience, and their forests rise to the sky. The division is real, the consequences are undeniable, and the choice is always yours. Chapter 3, Soil Season and Sacrifice. A seed by itself holds potential, but without the right soil, the right season, and the right sacrifice, it withers. This is why wealth is not only about earning and saving. It is about choosing where to plant and how to endure the waiting. Many people think their efforts failed because the seed was weak, when in reality they planted in the wrong soil or refused to wait for the right season. The principle of planting does not guarantee instant success. It demands wisdom in placement, timing, and perseverance. Soil matters because not every ground will allow roots to take hold. You can toss the finest seed on concrete, and it will never sprout. In the same way, money placed in shallow or hostile environments disappears. Consider the person who invests in a friend's reckless business idea simply because of emotional pressure. The soil looks promising in the excitement of the moment, but beneath the surface there are rocks and thorns. No planning, no discipline, no market. The seed is swallowed, and the planter walks away discouraged. Contrast this with the person who studies patiently, chooses solid investments, or builds a business on genuine demand. That soil may not look glamorous at first, but over time it yields steady growth. Season matters as well. Farmers know better than to plant in winter when the ground is frozen, no matter how good the seed. In finances, timing plays the same role. Buying into markets at their highest peak without understanding the cycle often leads to disappointment. Starting a venture in a collapsing industry is like planting in drought. Yet when the season is right, even modest efforts flourish. The key is not to rush blindly, but to recognize patterns, to watch for windows of opportunity, and to plant with patience. Many have lost fortunes not because they lack seeds, but because they try to force harvest in the wrong season. Sacrifice is the third pillar. Planting always involves giving up something now. When a farmer buries seeds, he cannot eat them. He denies himself present satisfaction because he trusts the future. In your financial life, sacrifice may mean driving an older car while your peers upgrade, or resisting vacations you cannot afford, or saying no to purchases that would bring momentary pleasure. These sacrifices are not losses. They are exchanges. You trade fleeting comfort for lasting abundance. The consumer sees sacrifice as deprivation, but the planter sees it as investment. Numbers can illustrate this better than words. Imagine two siblings, Lucas and Sophia, who both inherit $10,000. Lucas spends his share on a luxury trip across Europe. He returns with photographs and stories, but no lasting value. Sophia, however, invests her $10,000 into a modest mutual fund, averaging 7% annual growth. After 20 years, her seed has grown into nearly $40,000. After 30 years, it is close to $76,000. The same starting point, the same seed, but the soil, the season, and the sacrifice were different. Lucas consumed, Sophia planted. A story from history reveals the same principle. In the early 1900s, a man named Andrew invested small sums regularly in a then-unknown company producing beverages. His neighbors mocked him, saying he should buy more land or spend on visible luxuries. But Andrew saw fertile soil. Decades later, his modest investments in Coca-Cola shares multiplied into millions. His neighbors had little to show for their consumption. Andrew's choice of soil and his willingness to wait through decades of seasons created a forest from seeds others would have eaten. Choosing soil is not only about investments. It also applies to relationships, skills, and opportunities. Spend your energy in toxic environments, and your growth will suffocate. Place your time in communities of wisdom and discipline, and your growth will multiply. If you plant your efforts in a dead-end job without learning or expanding, your seeds remain trapped. But if you place even small efforts in areas that stretch you, your potential grows. Soil matters because it either nurtures or strangles the seed. Season is also about patience. You cannot demand immediate returns from seeds. When you start saving, the account looks unimpressive. When you begin investing, the numbers crawl forward at first. This is a season of waiting. Many give up during this period because the soil looks barren. But seasoned planters know that growth begins unseen. Roots are forming below the surface. If you abandon the process too soon, you rob yourself of the harvest that would have come with time. The world teaches you to expect instant results, but true wealth requires you to embrace seasons of silence. Sacrifice will test your resolve. It will ask whether you are willing to endure discomfort now for abundance later. It is the reason many fail. They cannot bear the thought of saying no to themselves. Yet every forest that stands today exists because someone was willing to bury their seed instead of eating it. Think of the immigrant family who works long hours, saves relentlessly, and lives simply for decades. Their sacrifice may look painful, but the outcome is children with education, homes without debt, and businesses that endure. Their forest was born of sacrifice, and its shade covers generations. Your own seeds demand the same. Ask yourself, where am I planting? Is this soil truly fertile? Am I respecting the season, or am I rushing? What sacrifices am I willing to endure today for the forest I dream of tomorrow? The answers will reveal whether your seeds grow or die. Remember, wealth is never an accident. It is always the product of soil chosen carefully, seasons respected faithfully, and sacrifices embraced courageously. If the power of a seed lies hidden within, the outcome of that seed depends on what surrounds it. Soil, season, and sacrifice are not optional details. They're the very environment that decides whether a seed multiplies or withers. You could hold the rarest seed in the world, but if you throw it on barren land or leave it exposed to frost, it will never bear fruit. In the same way, many people wonder why their financial seeds never grow, not realizing they've been careless with the ground, impatient with the seasons, or unwilling to accept the cost of sacrifice. Soil is often misunderstood. Many assume that as long as money is set aside, it will automatically grow. But money left in the wrong soil does little more than sit idle or even shrink. Consider leaving $10,000 in a simple savings account that earns only a fraction of a percent each year. After 10 years, inflation will have eaten more than half of its purchasing power. The soil was too poor to nourish growth. Contrast this with the same $10,000 placed in an index fund averaging 7% annually. After 10 years, the seed has grown to almost $20,000. The seed was the same, but the soil determined the harvest. In life, soil can also be people. Spend time in communities of consumption, and your seeds will be mocked. Friends who pressure you to spend every paycheck are barren ground. They may be fun in the short term, but they choke your future. On the other hand, surround yourself with mentors who value planting and your mindset changes. Their wisdom enriches your soil. You begin to think long-term, to respect discipline, to recognize opportunities. Good soil multiplies not only your money but your habits, your vision, and your endurance. Season requires patience, and patience is rare. The farmer who demands a harvest a day after planting will starve. Wealth, like crops, grows slowly at first. The beginning is always the hardest because the results are invisible. You save month after month, invest year after year, and at first it feels like nothing changes. This is a season of roots, hidden beneath the surface. If you quit here, you abandon the miracle before it can appear. Yet those who remain steady see the compounding effect explode over time. 10,000 becomes 20, 20 becomes 40, and eventually the growth outruns your contributions. Seasons are cruel to the impatient, but generous to the persistent. There is a story of May, a young woman in Shanghai, who began investing at age 22. Her friends laughed at her because she denied herself luxury handbags and dinners, claiming she was too strict. For 5 years, her account seemed unimpressive, barely above $20,000. But she stayed faithful to the season. At 40, her investments had crossed $500,000. By 55, they were worth over $2 million. Those same friends, who once laughed, now asked her for advice. May understood the seasons. She trusted the invisible work happening underground, while others wasted their seeds. Sacrifice is the test that separates dreamers from builders. Everyone wants a forest, but few are willing to bury the seed. Sacrifice means saying no to the easy path. It means working longer hours while others rest, living in a smaller apartment while others stretch themselves thin, cooking meals at home while others indulge in restaurants. At first, these sacrifices look like loss, but in reality they are exchanges. You are not losing, you are planting. Each sacrifice is a seed buried in hope of a harvest greater than the cost. Numbers can reveal this clearly. Suppose Daniel earns $50,000 a year and decides to save 15%, sacrificing luxuries his peers enjoy. Over 30 years, with a modest 7% return, his planted sacrifices grow into more than $2 million. Meanwhile, his co-worker Michael, who consumed every paycheck, retires with nothing but a pension. The difference is not intelligence, but sacrifice. Daniel gave up a little each month and reaped abundance later. Michael avoided discomfort and reaped emptiness. History repeats this pattern. In the 1970s, a man named Jose lived in Brazil working as a mechanic. He lived frugally, saving a portion of his modest income while resisting the temptation to buy flashy items. Neighbors teased him for being too simple, but Jose continued planting, buying small plots of land when others wasted money on parties. By the time he was 60, Jose owned properties worth millions. The sacrifice of his younger years became the shade of his later ones. Soil, season, and sacrifice form a trinity. Without the right soil, seeds rot. Without the right season, seeds freeze or burn. Without sacrifice, seeds are eaten. But when all three align, forests emerge where once it was emptiness. This is not theory. It is a law that governs both nature and finance. Your responsibility is to choose wisely, to wait faithfully, and to endure bravely. Ask yourself again, where is my soil? Am I planting in fertile ground? Or am I scattering seeds where they cannot grow? Am I patient with the season? Or do I demand a harvest too soon? Am I willing to sacrifice now? Or will I consume what was meant to multiply? The answers to these questions will decide whether your field lies barren or whether it becomes a forest that outlives you. Chapter 4, The Forest Builders. A single tree is impressive, but it is not enough to build a forest. One harvest may bring comfort, but it does not bring security. True wealth belongs to those who learn not just to plant, but to repeat the act so faithfully that their land fills with trees upon trees. Forest builders do not stop after one success. They create systems, routines, and habits that transform isolated victories into lasting abundance. They are the ones who understand that consistency is the bridge between potential and prosperity. When you look at a forest, you do not see the decades of quiet discipline that produced it. You do not see the countless mornings when a planter rose early to water, the seasons of drought endured, or the storm survived. You only see the final picture, abundance so overwhelming it looks effortless. In the same way, when you see wealthy families or enduring businesses, you witness the result, not the hidden years of systems built and habits repeated. Forests are monuments to discipline. The mistake many make is to stop at the first tree. They save a little, invest once, or start a project, and when it yields results, they relax. They tell themselves that one tree will provide enough. But one tree cannot shield you from every storm. One tree cannot provide food for generations. One tree can fall in a single night. Forest builders know this. They multiply their planting until the trees are so many that no single storm can destroy them. They diversify their efforts, spreading their seeds across different soils. So even if one area suffers, the forest as a whole thrives. Numbers illustrate this principle with clarity. Suppose you invest $1,000 a year for 20 years, averaging 7% growth. By the end, you have about $40,000. That is a single tree, useful but limited. Now imagine increasing that to $5,000 annually. In 20 years, you have over $200,000. If you continue to plant faithfully for 30 years, the forest rises to nearly $500,000. The difference is not one dramatic event, but steady, repeated planting. Forests grow from habits, not bursts of inspiration. There is a story of Samuel, a teacher who earned modest wages but was relentless in his planting. Every paycheck, he set aside a fixed percentage. At first, it seemed small, almost meaningless. But over decades, his trees multiplied. By retirement, Samuel had investments spread across real estate, bonds, and stocks. His colleagues, who once teased him for being frugal, were astonished. He did not just have one source of income, but many. His forest produced shade in the form of rental properties, fruit in the form of dividends, and strong roots in the form of security for his children. Samuel was never the richest in appearance, but in truth, he was a forest builder. Contrast him with David, another teacher, who also saved but without discipline. David would set aside money sporadically, only when convenient. He planted a few seeds, but then stopped. Some years he planted nothing at all. When storms came, a car accident, medical bills, unexpected expenses, his single tree was destroyed. He had no forest to protect him. The difference between Samuel and David was not luck, but systems. Samuel created unbreakable habits that worked whether he felt like it or not. David relied on motivation, which came and went. Building a forest also requires vision. You must imagine a future so vivid that you discipline yourself today to achieve it. Forest builders do not live in fantasy. They live in foresight. They see their children walking under the shade of trees, not yet planted. They see their future selves living free because of habits they practice now. This vision keeps them steady when others give up. Where consumers see sacrifice as misery, forest builders see a strategy. Consider Maria, a single mother who worked 2 jobs to provide for her children. She could have consumed every seed just to survive, but she created a system. She opened separate envelopes for saving, investing, and giving. Even when her income was small, she honored those envelopes. Over time, the amounts grew. She taught her children to respect the same discipline. By the time she reached her 60s, Maria had built not just her own security, but also a legacy of wisdom. Her children inherited more than money. They inherited the habits of a forest builder. A forest also protects itself. Once enough trees grow, the environment changes. The soil becomes richer, the shade prevents weeds, and the ecosystem supports life. Wealth behaves similarly. At a certain point, your habits, systems, and investments begin to reinforce one another. Dividends buy more shares. Rental income funds new properties. Knowledge gained from one venture strengthens the next. The forest becomes self-sustaining. This is a reward of consistency, a system so alive that it produces without constant struggle. The truth is that forests do not happen by accident. They require deliberate, repeated planting. The wealthy are not those who made one lucky decision, but those who created rhythms that lasted. Your future abundance will not depend on what you do once, but on what you do consistently, year after year. Every habit you form is either building a tree or cutting one down. Every choice either multiplies your seeds or devours them. Forest builders know this, and so they live with relentless intention. When you step into a dense forest, you feel something greater than the sum of its trees. The air is cooler, the ground is richer, the silence carries weight. That environment did not appear overnight. It was shaped by decades of planting, by layers of roots strengthening each other, and by countless cycles of growth and decay. Wealth, when built properly, carries the same atmosphere. It creates a sense of security that goes beyond numbers in an account. It becomes a living ecosystem that protects, multiplies, and sustains. The consumer lives in scarcity even when their income is high, because every tree they grow is quickly chopped down. The planter who stops at a single tree may feel proud for a season, but storms can destroy it. Only the forest builder enjoys the resilience of abundance. When one tree falls, dozens remain standing. When drought strikes, roots dig deeper together. When fire passes through, the soil is enriched for future growth. This is why you cannot stop after one act of planting. You must create habits that generate trees continuously until you live inside a forest. Systems are the secret. Forest builders automate their planting. They decide once and then let discipline carry them forward. A portion of every paycheck is directed into investments before consumption can touch it. Debts are repaid systematically, not randomly. Knowledge is pursued daily, not occasionally. These systems turn planting into a rhythm, as natural as breathing. Without systems, you rely on motivation, and motivation fails in the face of temptation. With systems, even your weakest days produce growth. Let us illustrate this with numbers. Imagine Amelia, who earns $60,000 a year. She sets up an automatic transfer of 10% of her income into investments, $6,000 annually. She does not touch it, she does not think about it, and she does not rely on willpower. Over 30 years, assuming a steady 7% return, those automatic seeds grow into nearly $600,000. Now consider Brian, who also intends to save but relies on deciding each month. Some months he saves, others he forgets. On average, he manages half of Amelia's consistency. After 30 years, his harvest is less than $300,000. The gap is not intelligence, but systems. Amelia became a forest builder. Brian remained a sporadic planter. Stories of enduring families reveal the same truth. In 19th century Europe, families like the Rothschilds became symbols of wealth not because of one brilliant move, but because of habits institutionalized across generations. They reinvested profits, educated their children in finance, and treated planting as a duty, not an option. Their forests grew so dense that even wars, recessions, and political upheavals could not destroy them completely. They built more than riches. They built resilience. You can see the same pattern in small businesses. A corner bakery that reinvests profits into better ovens, new recipes, and customer relationships eventually becomes a chain of bakeries. Another bakery, equally talented but focused only on daily sales, never grows beyond its original shop. One owner thinks in terms of planting a single tree each day, the other in terms of building a forest over decades. Both bake bread, but only one leave behind an inheritance. The power of compounding is the sunlight of the forest. At first, growth seems slow, almost invisible. The young forest looks fragile, but compounding accelerates over time, feeding on itself until growth becomes exponential. 10 years of planting looks small. 30 years looks unstoppable. This is why forest builders are relentless. They know the true harvest lies not in the first decade, but in the later ones. They do not quit because they understand that the longer the forest stands, the stronger it becomes. There is also a spiritual element to building a forest. A tree alone benefits only the planter, but forest benefits everyone who enters. Shade, fruit, shelter, and beauty flow outward. Wealth built as a forest is not only for personal consumption, but for generational blessing. Forest builders think of legacy. They establish trusts, create scholarships, fund charities, or simply leave behind examples of discipline that inspire children. Their forest becomes more than personal protection. It becomes a gift to society. Consider Helena, who began her career as a nurse. She lived simply, saved consistently, and invested modestly. By the time she retired, she had built a forest worth over $1 million. Instead of spending it all on personal comfort, Helena used part of her harvest to fund medical scholarships for underprivileged students. Her trees bore fruit that nourished generations she would never meet. Helena understood that the purpose of a forest is not only protect the planter, but to provide for others. The difference between wealth that vanishes and wealth that endures is whether you aim for a tree or a forest. Trees can fall, forests endure. Trees serve the moment. Forests shape the future. Your life will follow whichever you choose to build. You can scatter seed without plan and watch them sprout randomly, or you can create systems, habits, and vision that grow into a forest so abundant that nothing can erase it. Chapter 5. Storms, Fires, and Droughts. No matter how carefully you plant, no matter how fertile the soil or how disciplined the habit, storms will come, fires will sweep through, droughts will parch the ground. Wealth, like nature, is never safe from trial. To believe otherwise is to build illusions instead of forests. Yet, here lies the paradox. While storms destroy the careless, they strengthen the wise. Every crisis has the power to wipe away or to enrich, depending on whether you approach it as a consumer or as a planner. In the financial world, storms take the form of recessions, layoffs, unexpected expenses, or sudden emergencies. Fires appear as business collapses, failed investments, or betrayals of trust. Droughts manifest in long periods of stagnation when growth seems impossible. These events terrify consumers because they have no roots. They live from paycheck to paycheck. So when a storm comes, they are swept away. The planter, however, has prepared. He may bend under the wind, but he does not break. His roots go deep enough to draw strength even when the surface is dry. Let us picture a storm in numbers. Imagine a family with no savings earning $50,000 a year. When an unexpected medical bill of $5,000 arrives, they are forced into debt, paying high interest that drags them down for years. Their tree, weak and isolated, cannot withstand the storm. Now imagine another family with the same income but who planted steadily, saving 10% each month. When the same storm arrives, they dip into their emergency fund. They cover the $5,000 without panic. And while the storm is unpleasant, their forest remains standing. The difference lies not in income but in preparation. History is filled with storms that tested entire generations. In the Great Depression of the 1930s, many who lived as consumers lost everything almost overnight. Yet those who had planted wisely, diversifying their efforts and avoiding excessive debt, endured. Some even emerge stronger, buying land and businesses at fractions of their former prices. Their roots were deep enough to withstand the storm, and the very fire that destroyed others enriched their soil. Fires are perhaps the most painful trials, because they consume what you worked so long to build. A business collapses, an investment turns sour, or a trusted partner betrays you. In those moments, it feels as though years of planning have gone up in flames. Yet even fire has a hidden gift. In nature, fires clear dead wood, release nutrients, and make way for new growth. In finances, failure teaches lessons that success never could. The entrepreneur who loses everything in one venture often builds a stronger, wiser business the second time. The investor who suffers loss learns the importance of diversification and patience. Fire, though painful, purifies. Consider Marcus, who started a small restaurant with his savings. For 5 years it flourished, but a sudden economic downturn wiped him out. He was devastated, forced to close his doors. Many in his place would have given up. But Marcus took what the fire left behind, experience, connections, and hard lessons, and planted again. This time, he built a catering company with lower risk and better systems. Within a decade, his new forest was larger than the first. The fire destroyed his tree, but it fertilized the ground for a stronger forest. Droughts are subtler but equally dangerous. They are seasons when nothing seems to grow. You invest faithfully, but the markets remain flat. You save diligently, but progress feels slow. You work hard, but promotions do not come. Many abandon their planting in drought, convinced their seeds are worthless. Yet drought is often the test of patience that separates pretenders from planters. In time, rain always returns. Those who stayed faithful see their seeds burst to life when the season changes, while those who quit find only barren soil. Think of Elena, who invested consistently during a decade, when returns were minimal. Friends mocked her, saying she was wasting her money. But she continued through the drought, planting even when nothing seemed to grow. When the markets eventually recovered, her patience was rewarded with exponential growth. Those who abandoned the field during drought had nothing, but Elena harvested because she stayed when others fled. Storms, fires, and droughts cannot be avoided, but they can be endured. More than that, they can be used. A storm reveals the strength of your roots. A fire clears the ground for new planting. A drought tests your patience and multiplies your reward when rain returns. The consumer sees disaster. The planter sees preparation. The consumer gives up. The forest builder endures. Your life will face all three. The question is not whether storms, fires, and droughts will come, but whether you will prepare for them. If you plan only for fair weather, your trees will fall. But if you build deep roots, diversify your forest, and accept that trials are part growth, you will emerge stronger after each one. In the end, it is not the absence of hardship that builds abundance, but the ability to turn hardship into soil for greater growth. Every planter eventually discovers that wealth is not a straight line. It is not a smooth path from seed to harvest. Instead, it is a winding trail through seasons of prosperity and hardship, through bright summers and bitter winters. Forest builders learn to see beyond the immediate weather. They know that storms, fires, and droughts are not interruptions of the process. They are part of the process. Storms will come suddenly. One day the skies are clear, and the next, the winds rip through your life. You may lose a job you thought secure, face a medical bill that empties your account, or watch as markets collapse without warning. Consumers panic in storms because they built their houses on sand. Planters bend, but do not break. Their roots hold them firm. They may lose branches, they may lose leaves, but the trunk stands tall. Preparation makes the difference. An emergency fund is like a sturdy trunk. Insurance is like bark that shields against damage. Multiple streams of income are like roots that draw water from many directions. Storms expose whether you prepared or pretended. Fires are different. They are not sudden gusts of wind, but raging infernos that consume everything you thought permanent. An investment turns fraudulent. A business partnership dissolves in betrayal. A financial crisis wipes out years of savings. In those moments, you feel stripped bare like a field of ashes. Yet those who study nature know that after fire, forests often come back stronger. Old debris is cleared, pests are destroyed, and nutrients return to the soil. In finances, failure does the same. It burns away arrogance, forces humility, and leaves behind the wisdom to rebuild more wisely. Numbers can tell the story of fire. Imagine you invest $100,000 in a business that fails completely. To the consumer, this is the end. The fire has destroyed them. To the planner, it is painful but temporary. They take the lessons learned, save again, and invest more carefully. Within 10 years, they may build something worth $500,000. The loss, though devastating, became the fertilizer for a larger harvest. Fire can be final if you quit, but if you replant, it becomes a doorway to greater abundance. Droughts are perhaps the hardest trials because they require silent endurance. Nothing dramatic happens. No sudden storm, no blazing fire, just day after day of dry skies. The markets refuse to grow. Promotions never arrive. Opportunities seem to vanish. It is in drought that many give up, not because of catastrophe, but because of boredom and despair. Yet drought is where character is forged. To keep planting when nothing grows is to prove that you believe in the seed, not in circumstances. Think of Jonathan, who invested faithfully through a 10-year period when the markets barely moved. Friends mocked him, saying he was wasting his time. But Jonathan stayed steady. When the drought ended and the rains returned, his seeds exploded with growth. Those who abandoned their planting had nothing, but Jonathan's forest surged ahead. His story is proof that droughts are not the end. They are the waiting room of multiplication. The emotional toll of storms, fires, and droughts is heavy, and this is why consumers collapse under them. Consumers tie their peace to circumstances. When the skies are clear, they are happy. When the winds blow, they despair. Planters tie their peace to principles. They know that trials will come, so they prepare their hearts as much as their accounts. They accept difficulty as part of the process, and this acceptance gives them resilience. They do not enjoy storms, but they endure them with calm. Consider how even great fortunes have walked through these seasons. During the financial crisis of 2008, many investors panicked, selling at losses and locking in despair. Yet others saw the fire and chose to plan anew. They bought shares at record lows, endured ridicule, and within a decade their forests had doubled and tripled. The crisis did not decide winners and losers. The response did. Preparation is your shield. If you build reserves, diversify your investments, and live below your means, storms will not sweep you away. If you accept that some ventures will fail, you will not be destroyed when fire passes through. If you trust the process and keep planting in drought, you will be ready when rain falls again. These three truths separate those who collapse from those who rise stronger. Nature has always known this. Forests that endure for centuries do so because they expect storms, they survive fires, and they withstand droughts. They adapt, they deepen, and they persist. Wealth is no different. If you build your financial life as a fragile plant, the first challenge will destroy you. If you build it as a forest, storms will test you, fires will refine you, and droughts will strengthen you. But you will endure, and in the end, your abundance will not only survive hardship, it will be defined by it. Chapter 6, Legacy of the Planter. One day, the planter walks through his forest and realizes something profound. It is larger than him. The shade stretches farther than he can walk in a single afternoon. Birds sing in branches he never personally touched. Streams run clear because roots he planted decades ago now hold the soil in place. This is the moment when wealth transforms from personal comfort into legacy. The true reward of planting is not only the fruit you eat, but the forest you leave behind for others. Consumers rarely leave anything of value. When they depart, their debts remain, their possessions depreciate, and their families struggle to recover. They live for themselves, and when their breath ended, so did their influence. Planters, by contrast, leave shade that outlives them. Their decisions echo for generations. The children of a planter inherit not only assets but wisdom, not only resources but habits. The legacy of planting is not measured in numbers alone, but in the culture it creates. Legacy begins with vision. You must see beyond your own lifetime. The farmer who plants an oak tree knows he will never sit under its full shade, yet he plants anyway, because he believes in the generations to come. Wealth works the same way. When you invest in education for your children, when you build businesses that endure beyond your own leadership, when you establish foundations or trusts that outlive you, you are planting oaks. You are declaring that your life is not the end of the story, but the beginning of many more. Consider an example with numbers. Imagine Daniel, who saves and invests faithfully over his life and leaves behind a portfolio worth $2 million. If his children consume it all at once, it disappears within a few years, like seeds devoured a harvest. But if they plant it wisely, earning a modest 6% annually and withdrawing only what they need, that portfolio can provide income for generations. What Daniel left behind becomes a forest instead of a meal. The difference is legacy. History remembers the families who built with legacy in mind. In the 19th century, many wealthy industrialists did not simply amass riches for themselves. They built libraries, universities, hospitals, and charities. Their names live on because they planted seeds in institutions that outlived them. Even in modest families, legacy is visible. The grandmother who lived frugally and taught her children to save. The father who refused to live in debt and left behind a paid home. These are forest builders whose shade shelters descendants long after they are gone. Legacy is not only financial, it is cultural. If you teach your children to consume, they will inherit poverty regardless of what you leave. If you teach them to plant, they will inherit wealth even if you leave little. Habits are more powerful than money. Money without wisdom is like seeds in the hands of a fool. It will be eaten. Wisdom without money is still fertile ground, because a planter can rebuild from nothing. The greatest gift you can leave behind is not just wealth, but the mindset of planting. Take the story of Rosa, a woman who worked as a tailor all her life. She never earned more than modest wages, yet she taught her children discipline. She showed them how to save from every paycheck, how to avoid debt, and how to invest in learning. Rosa passed away with little money, but her children, armed with her wisdom, built businesses, homes, and investments. Today, her grandchildren thrive because of seeds she planted in values, not just in bank accounts. Rosa's forest was invisible in her lifetime, but undeniable in the generations that followed. Your legacy begins today with the seeds you choose to plant. Every dollar you invest, every habit you form, every principle you model becomes part of the forest your descendants will inherit. You may think your choices affect only you, but they echo through time. The meal you consume today is gone tomorrow, but the tree you plant today may shelter a child not yet born. That is the power of legacy. It is tempting to live only for yourself, to consume and enjoy while you can. But ask yourself, when I am gone, will the ground I leave behind be barren or fruitful? Will my family inherit debt or discipline, emptiness or abundance? Legacy is a final test of whether you lived as a consumer or as a planter. Consumers disappear with their possessions. Planters live on in the shade of forests they never fully walked. The forest a planter leaves behind is more than wood and shade. It is memory. It is influence. It is direction for those who come after. Wealth, when it matures into legacy, ceases to be only about numbers on paper. It becomes a story written into the lives of children, grandchildren, and even strangers who benefit from decisions made decades earlier. Consumers vanish quickly from memory, their choices dissolving like smoke. Planters endure because their impact remains rooted in the soil long after they're gone. To understand legacy, think again of nature. A mighty tree falls in the forest, and yet its roots feed the ground. Its trunk provides shelter as it decays, and its seeds give rise to new life. Death does not end its contribution. It multiplies it. In the same way, a planter's death does not end their influence. What they leave behind, money, wisdom, habits, and opportunities, continues to feed those who walk the path after them. One of the tragedies of consumption is how it impoverishes not only the consumer, but also their descendants. A parent who lives with debt often passes that burden to their children. A consumer who avoids discipline cannot teach what they never practiced. Entire families remain trapped in cycles of scarcity because one generation refused to plant. On the other hand, even a modest planter can change the trajectory of a family forever. A mother who insists on saving, a father who teaches the value of work, a grandparent who leaves behind a paid home. All these are seeds that grow into forests of stability and possibility. Consider an illustration with numbers. Imagine two men, both fathers, both earning the same income over their lives. One consumes everything and leaves his family with nothing but $10,000 of debt. The other plans consistently and leaves behind a trust of $200,000. The first man's children start their adult lives already burdened, paying off debts they never created. The second man's children begin with opportunities, perhaps education funded, perhaps a home purchased. The gap created by one generation multiplies across many. Legacy is not only about what you give, but also about what you prevent your descendants from suffering. Stories of legacy echo throughout history. Think of farmers who cleared fields and planted orchards not for themselves, but for those yet unborn. They lived in poverty, but their descendants prospered. Their names may never appear in history books, yet every harvest that followed bore silent testimony to their sacrifices. True wealth builders live with this perspective, that their life is too small a container for their vision, so they stretch it into the future through legacy. Legacy is not always grand. Sometimes it is as simple as a habit passed down. A grandfather who taught his children never to borrow for luxuries may leave no fortune in cash, but he leaves the habit of living debt-free. That habit alone, multiplied across generations, prevents thousands of wasted dollars in interest and keeps families stable. A grandmother who modeled generosity may not leave millions, but her descendants learn to use their forests to shelter others. Legacy is culture more than currency. Yet legacy also requires intentionality. If you do not plan, what you leave may be wasted. Many fortunes have disappeared within a single generation because the planner left money but not wisdom, assets but not systems. The forest was handed to children who had never learned how to care for trees, and in their ignorance, they cut it down. To leave a true legacy, you must prepare not only your resources but also your heirs. Teach them the principles of planting. Expose them to sacrifice. Show them the value of patience. Without this, your forest may die with you. Numbers demonstrate the risk. Studies show that 70% of inheritances are gone by the second generation and 90% by the third. Why? Because consumers inherit what they never learned to build. They see the forest as a pile of firewood rather than a living ecosystem. Only when wisdom accompanies wealth does the legacy endure. There's a story of Esther, who built a modest estate through decades of saving and wise investing. Before she passed away, she gathered her children and grandchildren, not only to divide her assets, but to share her philosophy. She told them, "This is not for you to consume. This is for you to plant." She created a family agreement that required part of the inheritance to be reinvested. Today, decades after her passing, her family's forest is larger than ever. Esther understood that legacy requires teaching, not just giving. As you think about your own life, ask yourself, what shade will remain when I am gone? Will people remember me as someone who consumed everything, or as someone who planned faithfully? Will my name be tied to debts or to opportunities? Will the seeds I hold die with me, or will they grow into forests that whisper my story long after I am gone? Legacy is not built in the future. It is built today. Every seed you plant now is part of a forest you may never fully see. Yet that forest will speak for you when your voice is silent. It will tell your children and their children that you were a planter, that you believed in seeds, that you left behind not only wealth but wisdom. And that is the truest measure of abundance, to live in such a way that your life continues to bear fruit long after it's over.